Welcome back for the 4-star books. This was my longest list out of all of them for the year, so let's just jump in. So to start off with, we have Astral Projection for Beginners, 6 Techniques for Traveling to Other Realms by Edain McCoy. Because I've read so many books, it's nice to not have books that are always just for beginners, and this was one of those. So it's definitely for a beginner, but a beginner for the astral projection side of it, not necessarily for a witch. I feel like you need to have some background on, like, you know, the usual techniques that you learn in early witchcraft, like visualization, shielding, meditation, stuff like that. And really, a lot of the techniques in this book are very similar to Inner Temple of Witchcraft. And again, that's one of the greatest books to learn witchcraft, but to also learn like a lot of the like mental exercises that are involved. So this would be a really great combination of the two if you're more into astral projection. I feel like Penzak walks you through the being able to do it a little bit more slowly, but this is a really good book if you've already got that stuff down, but you want to move into astral projection. Next, we have got Norse Myths, Viking Legends of Heroes and Gods by Martin J. Dougherty, something, last names. So this is a great resource if you are new to all things Norse. It's a little bit repetitive, but it's so well done that it flows very well. Then we have got Freeing the Genie Within, Manifesting Abundance, Creativity, and Success in Your Life by Deborah Lynn Katz. So this is one of those books that, like, I'm still thinking about it, and it's like almost a year later. This was such a good book. So this is one that takes the law of attraction, but makes it practical. There were so many times when I was reading this that the immediate of, like, my usual kind of snarky, like, inner monologue kicks in, and then she would answer my snarky monologue without me actually talking to the author, and it was really, really good. I love the, like, exercises in here. I definitely want to go through it at some point. Continuing along, we have got How to Heal with Color by Ted Andrews, which one of the things I love is when a book has a very specific topic that it's writing on, and it stays on topic, which this book does. It really is just heavily based on just straight visualization, so in a way I kind of feel like it's more for the intermediate witch, and like the techniques are very interesting. I did try it quite a few times after reading it, and I feel like it worked pretty well. It's a really well-written book. Then we have got Witchcraft on a Shoestring, Practicing the Craft Without Breaking Your Budget by Deborah Blake. This is the book that Thrifty Witch was trying to be. It is great for the witch on a budget. The recipes and spells were super interesting and fun. Then we have got How to Do Psychic Readings Through Touch by Ted Andrews. It was a lot of similar techniques that are found in this book that are actually more applicable to things outside of just the physical touch healing thing and psychic readings and whatever. Like, the techniques he's teaching you can really be applied to a lot of different areas of magic. And once again, he stays on topic. Really love that. We don't get a lot of the backstory of, like, again, a lot of books will say it's about a topic and then it just becomes a, like, regular book anyways of, like, Witchcraft 101. This stayed on the same topic the entire way through. And also it had a lot of really great advice for just giving readings in general. Then we have got Egyptian Prosperity Magic, Spells and Recipes for Financial Empowerment by Claudia D. Dillaire. Again, names. So this book, the spell type is very repetitive. It's so similar, there's just a few minor changes throughout it. And at first I didn't love it, but I had my husband look it over and he actually really enjoyed it. And so you just got to keep in mind, like, what is the one that's going to work for you? Do you like it? Because sometimes that repetitive thing can get obnoxious. I like to have some variety in how you do your spells, but he liked it and he thought it was actually really good for beginners so you can really get, like, the technique down. So keep that in mind. It is very repetitive of a style, but I love that the spells were not your generic ones and instead were really great for creatives like myself, who is an author, but also just for artists in general. Then we have got Kindling the Native Spirit, Sacred Practices for Everyday Life by Denise Lynn. This makes embracing a quote-unquote native spirit very accessible and welcoming, and there are examples from all across the globe in here, and really it's just practical ideas for you to connect with the world in a different way than we normally see. Continuing along, we have The Eclectic Witch's Book of Shadows, Witchy Wisdom at Your Fingertips by Deborah Blake. First of all, the artwork in this book was so gorgeous. However, one of the reasons that this wasn't like a top star book of a 5-star is that there was, I felt like, just a little too many pages just blank for notes. But that said, this is a book that I would readily recommend for any beginners or anyone who is just like kind of interested in the craft, like a coworker, a family friend, whatever. Somebody around you wants to know about witchcraft. This is a really good book to hand them. Then we have got Celebrating the Great Mother, a handbook of earth-honoring activities for parents and children by Cait Johnson and Myra Shaw. So this really reminded me of old school Charming Pixie Flora here on YouTube because a lot of her video topics are from this book. So really, it's just a great book for anyone who has some witchy family and maybe you're, young kids and you're raising them as witches and pagans. This is a great book. Or if you just want to do some fun crafts and stuff, it's a fun book too. Then we have got Earth, Air, Fire, and Water, More Techniques of Natural Magic by Scott Cunningham. I love that the technique of this book is really just use what's around you. It's great for the thrifty witch and just it's all about simple magic. Then we come to The Spiral Dance, a rebirth of the ancient religion of the Great Goddess by Starhawk. The reason that I liked this book is not so much the book itself, but knowing the importance it has as like a historical book for modern witchcraft. This is one of the big books that like everyone references back to. It was a huge like turning point in the practice that we know of for surezies. Again, looking back in ancient times, it's really hard to see the true history because so much has been changed and altered, mostly on purpose, because again, they didn't want it to be a thing. But this is like our timeline. People are still alive. It is our known history, and I feel like a lot of people should just read it for like the historical context of this book. Then we have got Modern Numerology, which is in fact not modern, by Morris C. Goodman. So this is an old book, but surprisingly, it's not really that outdated. Like the information and even the writing style doesn't feel old. But the thing is that as I was reading through this, one of the things that just makes me laugh is that when you have like the random birthday examples that you'll find, like, usually you're going to think of whenever it's like roughly published, right? But it's just so kind of weird when you're reading it to see like 1909 as the birth year, especially now, because those are going to be like well over 100 years ago. It's the little things that make up life, and it was just fun. Continuing along, we have got Wicca Nature Magic, a beginner's guide to working with nature spellcraft by Lisa Chamberlain. The older title worked a lot better for this book because really it is a book on trees. Like there's a couple pages here and there on other things like flowers, but really this is a book on tree magic. But other than that, it is a really great resource for tree magic. Then we have got Numerology, a complete guide to understanding and using your numbers of destiny by Hans de Cause. Again, the names. So this is really just a great book if you are interested in numerology. Then we have got The Ancient Art of Fairy Magic by DJ Conway. It's really interesting to read, and I feel like if you're interested in the Fae, it would be a great book. But much like a lot of books by DJ Conway, you might want to do a little bit more research on it because there does seem to be a very heavy Wiccan influence on the information. Then we have got The Everyday Witch's Coven, Rituals and Magic for Two or More by Deborah Blake. This is a great resource for modern eclectic witches who are wanting to start a coven. Next, we have got Circle Round, Raising Children in Goddess Traditions by Anne Hill, Diane Baker, and Starhawk. This is great if you are raising witchy kids with a variety of levels of witchery and discusses a lot of the topics that may arise, and it's definitely more for parents who are already aware of the basics of witchcraft. Continuing along, we have got An Illuminated Guide to Wicca, a complete visual manual by Helena Domenic-Wills. I think that's how you're supposed to say that name. But this is a really great resource that I would recommend, again, as kind of a book for beginners, or if you have somebody around you who is interested in, like, you call yourself a witch? This is a really great book to hand them. I also really love the brief history, but it's very well written for our modern known history of Wicca and modern witchcraft. Then we have got the Llewellyn's 2023 Sabbath Almanac, Rituals, Crafts, Recipes, and Folklore by, of course, Llewellyn. There is a lot of information in here, but really this one, it feels like it's only great if you're a beginner or you're not really familiar with the Wheel of the Year. And honestly, for this one, I didn't like the authors, so I don't know why I rated this as high as I did. But I think it was just because, like, I was obsessed with, like, getting to read these yearbooks, and it's like, this is cool. And, like, maybe it's just, like, I knew, like, my own personal bias. But yeah, I didn't like most of the authors in this book, but I mean, as a concept of it, it's really great, and it comes out every year, and they usually switch up the authors anyways, so, like, just pick up maybe next year's. Then we have got Llewellyn's 2022 Witch's Companion, A Guide to Contemporary Living by, again, Llewellyn. So the content for the Witch's Companions year to year doesn't really age. It's, again, just a collection of articles. So the topics are very varied and random. And I think it's really great for beginners to consider a lot of different topics that they might not think of. Then we have got Llewellyn's Little Book of Unicorns by Angela A. Wicks. And this is one of those books that it left me very inspired, and I'm still inspired from it all this time later. Continuing along, we have got Rites of Passage, The Pagan Wheel of Life by Pauline Campanelli. So this gives you a lot of ideas for rites throughout life, but A, it is out of print, and B, it is very for, like, the only stereotypical family, and it's just heavily focused on, like, the mother experience, aka, like, pregnancy. There's a really big emphasis on that, and it does kind of suck that there was zero mention, really, for adoptive parents or fostering and, like, bringing kids in at, like, a later age, because, again, that's going to be my experience, and it sucks when you don't get to see that, and it just focuses more on your ability to create a child within your own body. But there's plenty of pagan parents that are going to be adopting and fostering and not having a standard family anyways. Like, we have a lot of, like, rainbow families that, you know, it's going to be parents of the same gender or non-gendered parents that were just not included. And it just kind of sucks when you see it. And it's like, I really haven't found that very often in the pagan parenting books yet. Next, we have got Llewellyn's 2023 Magical Almanac, Practical Magic for Everyday Living, again by Llewellyn. The topics were really interesting in this one, and it's just one of those that I feel like you could just pick it up and read it and get a bunch of ideas. Then we have got Backyard Garden Witchery, Creating Magical Space Outside Your Door by Laurel Woodward. It's not perfect, but it is a really good resource for kitchen magic, and it just has a lot of really great mundane advice alongside magical. This is one that I do want to pick up because it's still lingering in the brain. And when the books that linger out of reading almost 200 books in a year, it's like, you know, I probably should get that one because it was really good. Next, we have got Seasons of a Magical Life, A Pagan Path of Living. And this is very flowery in the storytelling. And the author does have a bit of a dated experience and a very, like, niche experience at that. So, like, it is interesting, but do keep in mind that, like, once in a while, it just kind of is like, oh, that's not a lived experience of mine. Like, this thing of, like, wanting to just always wash dishes by hand and how their kids were, like, so thrilled to, like, have modern appliances instead of having to do everything, like, by hand as if it was almost 100 years ago. Just little things like that. It just feels a little bit dated, but other than that, it's a pretty good read. And we have got Llewellyn's Little Book of Tarot by Barbara Moore. This is a really great resource for learning the tarot. The pages are colored and uses a bunch of different decks instead of just the Rider-Waite. And for each card, it does have a one-line summary, which I absolutely loved. Next, we have got The Witch's Wand, The Craft, Lore, and Magic of Wands and Staffs. And I don't know how to say that name, but I am learning Irish. And then I think this might either be, I think it's going to be Welsh is how you're supposed to pronounce it, which is a different language, but is available. We're learning languages. Me and my husband have decided to hop on Duolingo and learn languages. So it's like, I'm starting to learn that, but it's very brief and I'm not great at it. So these names, I don't know yet. But anyways, so this book, I'm just always impressed whenever an author can write a full book, which, I mean, they're not huge books, but it is a full book on one tool. That takes a lot of skill because it doesn't feel like there's a lot of filler either. Like, all of the topics are really well discussed, and that takes skill. And so really, if you are starting to use your wand, you're wanting to look into having a wand, you want to make one, this is the book that you need. Then we have got Llewellyn's 2024 Moon Sign book, Plan Your Life by the Cycles of the Moon by, of course, Llewellyn. This feels advanced. So this is for the advanced witch in astrology and all things moon. If you know that stuff, I feel like it would be really great information. I didn't know most of this, so I just felt like a beginner and knew nothing, but like, if you know that very well, it's going to be probably a really good resource for you. Next, we have got Llewellyn's 2024 Magical Almanac, Practical Magic for Everyday Living by, again, Llewellyn. This was a really great set of articles. Again, it's a good resource just to read yearly, just to get some various perspectives, because they cover a lot of different topics. Then we have got Llewellyn's 2024 Witch's Companion, A Guide to Contemporary Living, and it's pretty much the exact same as the previous one, which is the Magical Almanac, as in, it's a lot of varied and interesting topics and articles. Recommend getting it every year just to see the new ones. It'll give you different perspectives and whatnot. Next, we have got Wicca, What's the Real Deal? Breaking Through the Misconceptions by Dana Winters, Patricia Gardner, and Angela Kaufman. This is a very niche and particular book, but when you need that niche and particular book, it is there for you. This is a Q&A back and forth for Christians to Wiccans. And like a lot of us are going to be around Christians, and this is just such a good book. If you have a Christian in your life, and I say that because it's very specific to that faith, I don't think a lot of it's going to transfer over for like Jews or Hindus or Muslim. It's really honed in onto the Christians because they're usually the ones you're going to come across. And so like if you have someone who is Christian who has a lot of questions about what you're doing, and you just need either quick rebuttal of like when they ask these kinds of questions, because they are common questions that you're going to come across, or if you want to just hand them this book, it is such a great resource. Then we have got Witchful Thinking, A Wise Woman's Handbook for Creating a Charmed Life by Zoe Howe. This was so entertaining to read. Her writing style is just fun, and it is just a really great book for beginners. There's a lot of good beginner books. You might want to read a bunch of them as a new witch, a beginner, just because it helps to read it a bunch of times to solidify it in your mind, see some few different perspectives, people write it a little differently. But this is like a very more modern approach than some of the ones that we always recommend. So it's nice to throw in some newer titles along with our older ones when we're recommending books for beginners. Next, we have got Llewellyn's Little Book of Spirit Animals by Melissa Alvarez. So this is really more of a resource to have on your shelf when you need it versus read it cover to cover. I mean, you can if you're like me and crazy. It's a little boring to read cover to cover, but like it's more of a really great pocket guide for just like quick referencing when you need it. And honestly, sometimes we just need those kind of books. Next, we have got Llewellyn's 2024 Herbal Almanac, a practical guide for growing, cooking, and crafting by, of course, Llewellyn. This is a really great resource if you are a gardener. Next, we have got Llewellyn's 2023 Daily Planetary Guide, Complete Astrology at a Glance by, of course, Llewellyn. This is really good for learning astrology just from the beginning section. So it is just like your regular planner, but it has a little bit of an intro section beforehand, and that is really good if you are starting to learn about astrology. It explains things really well, but the rest of it is just a planner. So, there's not like a whole lot, and I don't know if they repeat it every year, but at least this one, that beginning section was really good for learning about astrology. Next, we have got Llewellyn's 2024 Sun Sign Book, Horoscopes for Everyone by Llewellyn. This is not for a beginner in astrology, but it has a lot of information if you know about it. Next, we have got House Magic. I read it as Haus, but that I don't think is how it's pronounced. I think it's pronounced House. I have tried the Googlings of it. It seems to be pronounced House despite a weird spelling. Anyways, Transform Your Home with Witchcraft by Erica Feldman. This is interior design as a witch for your house. It had a lot of really interesting ideas to consider. The pictures weren't my favorite because her aesthetic and mine are just not the same. I personally hate all of the white walls, white decor. Everything is just white on white on white, and it makes me feel like I'm in a hospital. But other than that, the information in here was actually really interesting. Then we have got A Witch's Guide to Creating and Performing Rituals That Actually Work by Phoenix LaFay. Now, whenever a title includes the actually works bit, I usually am just cringing, but this actually seems to be a really good book. So it sticks to the topic of just talking about writing and doing rituals. It's a great resource for learning and evaluating your rituals, whether you are solitary, in a small group, or a large group. In large group, we're talking like over 100 people, 200, 300, 500 people. Every single person from that huge to just you. This is a really great book to dive into your rituals. Then we have got Eclectic Witchcraft, Old Ways for Modern Magic by Charlotte Wilde. Another great book for beginners. It does give you a lot of warning and heads up information that you'll need to know that a lot of books don't include. And it also really explains your natal chart very well. Next, we have got The Body Keeps the Score, which I always just shorten to The Body Keeps Score, but there's an extra the in there, and I have no idea how to say this author's name. This book I talked about on Patreon, and this is one of those books that, like, it's talked about a lot, but I don't think a lot of people actually have read the book. So, like, the thing with this one in particular is that it can be very triggering. There were quite a few times I realized that I could not do his job because I could not set my own personal opinions aside dealing with some of these people. And, like, I couldn't have the empathy needed to do the therapy work that he does because, like, it is a very triggering book. So, like, you need to keep that in mind if you decide to pick this book up because it is a really popular book. A lot of witches are into therapy and, like, you know, just all of the psychological things. And so this is one that is really talked about a lot. But keep in mind, it is super triggering. It's got a lot of details and, like, a lot of very intense situations that are described that personally, like, I was pissed at a lot of the people he would talk about. And you're just sitting there. I was, like, mad about it for, like, weeks afterwards. I'm like, I really hope worse things happen to these people. They're just so horrible. It's one of those books that, like, sometimes you get really triggered by it. And, like, you get really pissed off at the people that he's talking to. And you're like, it's a lot. It's emotionally a very heavy book. So keep that in mind. But when you get to the end of it, where he talks about, like, doing the things to help, it really just confirms that, like, witchcraft. And, like, he doesn't tell you to go do witchcraft, but it's the stuff of witchcraft that we tell you to do all the time. Meditate, visualization, affirmations, gratitude, yoga, like, all of these things that we talk about as witches to do, just as, like, regular routine things, he tells you to do. It was crazy to see how much was like, oh, this is just witchcraft. Just do witchcraft. That fixes your problems. Like, slightly repackaged, but, like, basically the premise of most witchcraft practices. Continuing along, we have got Llewellyn's 2020 Witches Spell a Day Almanac, Holidays and Lore, Spells, Rituals, and Meditations by, of course, Llewellyn. I thought this was a really interesting collection of spells to consider. Then we have got another one from the Patreon exclusive. These are, like, not necessarily witchy books, but they're, like, witchy adjacent. Again, these are just, like, random ones that I was like, I don't know if it really fits as, like, the witchcraft books, so I just kind of put them over on Patreon. And this was You Can Heal Your Life by Louise L. Hay. She is the creator of Hay House Publishing. And this book was surprisingly kind of helpful, kind of. So there's, like, a lot of, like, ish involved in this book. It's, like, it's really intriguing. Don't know about it. So, like, the thing is, I love the affirmations and such in here, but, like, some of the exercises are just not my jam. There's a lot of, like, but forgive, and I'm, like, not a forgiving person. So, if anything, it's more of, like, let's get to, like, feeling neutral about it. But I'm not going to forgive you. I feel like that's just not in my vocabulary. No. I'm from a long line of holding grudges. I'm going to continue that line, thank you. But this book is one of those that I was like, I don't know. I've tried to go through some of the exercises just to see. And, like, I don't know that they were exactly helpful. But again, the affirmations were really great. And I actually was considering to buy this book at some point. And then I was going through right as I was getting ready to record these videos for the end of the year. And I happened to find a box of books that we had planned to donate from my mother-in-law's collection, because she had a lot of, like, Christian books and, like, Christian witchy books, and we're not about that in our house. And so we were going to donate them. And then I found this book in there, and I was like, what? Why didn't I give this a chance? Then I picked a few others out of her collection before I have a massive pile to donate. But yeah, it was kind of cool to find this book. It was like, thank you, mother-in-law. I didn't know that this book was even there. Because I don't know, it's one of those, it's weird. I swear it wasn't there before. And then found it. So apparently it's a sign that I should go through that book once again. Next is Ceridwen, Celtic Goddess of Inspiration by Christopher Hughes. So this is a really interesting perspective specifically about the Welsh. And it inspired me to learn a bit more, but it really didn't actually answer a lot of the questions that I had about Ceridwen, but it left me inspired to learn more at least. This one was a bit ironic because I actually really hated the first book, but I read them out of order. So this is The Holy Wild Grimoire, a heathen handbook of magic spells and verses by Danielle Dulski. So again, the term of heathen is kind of misused, but this book at least was a little bit closer. So I talked about the first one, The Holy Wild, in the 2-star books because I just really hated that book. But this one I actually liked, and I think the reason I liked this is that it's very similar to a different book called Journey to the Dark Goddess. I talked about that one in 2022. And this book, The Holy Wild Grimoire, is more of like goddess archetypes rather than the Bible figures that's in the first book. Then we have got Kitchen Witchcraft, Spells and Charms by Rachel Patterson. So this book was crazy because there are so many things that I should hate about this book and really, really despise it, and I still loved it so much, which is really hard to do because like there's many things. One of them being is that the bibliography is just a dumpster fire because like who doesn't include author names? And also there's a coloring book listed as one of the references. And yet somehow, despite the many problems that is this book, I really freaking loved it. I don't understand it. It has really good information and it's like a recommended book from me despite the issues. And that really, I was not anticipating. Like the writing is so entertaining. There's bits and pieces that I don't love about this book, obviously, but somehow it really was a good book, again, despite many problems. Next is another one that I really didn't anticipate loving. So it's Modern Wicca, Beliefs and Traditions for Contemporary Life by Rowan Morgana. I think it's how you're supposed to say that. So this is a really great book for beginners, and again, just one of those books that if somebody's interested in witchcraft and you're like, I'm a witch, and they're like, what? This is a good book to hand them. I was really pleasantly surprised to find information in here that even I was like, ooh, that's good. I should write that down for my own self. That comes very sparingly as you have hit over a decade as a witch who's actively studying. But like also for reading the amount of books that I do, it's really fun when I can find sections that it's like, dang, I actually really like this book. This was really good. And this was one that I was really, really surprised to actually find that I enjoyed it as much as I did. Next, we have got Wicca for One, The Path of Solitary Witchcraft by Raymond Buckland. This is a really great book for discussing how to be a solitary witch. He is one of the main founders, especially of Wicca, over here in the US. He was kind of our dude. He is our version of Gerald Gardner in a way. He was kind of the main dude for a long time. And his books are always pretty interesting. And this was just a really good book discussing instead of having a coven for whatever reason, becoming a solitary witch. Next, we have got Traditional Wicca, A Seeker's Guide by Thorne Mooney. This was such a good book. I was so surprised. This is one of those that I was nervous to read, and it's I didn't need to be nervous. This was so well written. This is one that I definitely need, when I can, probably when we get a different house that's bigger, but when I have my own library where I can have the books that I want, I do want to have a section of books to hand out as my recommended shelves because this is one of those that it's so good and I feel like everybody should read at some point because even though it is about traditional Wicca, it explains things so well that I feel like no other book so far has really explained traditional Wicca in such a good way. And also, even though, again, it is really about traditional Wicca, and it did make me long for, a split second of, wouldn't it be nice to have a coven like that? But then immediately it's nah, I like my solitary life, thank you. But outside of that, the thing is with this book, it is so good for finding a potential coven. Traditional Wicca or not, this is the book, if you're, thinking about a coven, you need to read this book. And lastly, book 50, I know, there was 50 of these, is Secrets of Santa Muerte, A Guide to the Prayers, Spells, Rituals, and Hexes by Cressida Stone? I know, the names. So I am just uberly fascinated with Santa Muerte, and I'm always inspired when I read about her, And granted, I'm not planning to necessarily work with her, and I talked about this on a Patreon exclusive, but like when I read about Santa Muerte, all I can think about is hell. And that is weird because like I never really have had that. Other pagans might when you read about like Zeus and then you think of Thor, or like I think it's what Ares is the god of war or something, or Mars or something. I'm not great with my Greek mythology. But the god of war from like the Greeks to like Tyr, you know, I think it is Mars, whoever Mars is in the Greeks, because isn't that the Roman name? Anyways, you know, people compare deities of all kinds to be like, oh, well, they're the same. Like Morrigan and Hecate and Freya are supposed to all be the same, although Freya and Hel are sometimes swapped. But like, still, if you get that vibe, you might understand it. I usually don't. But when I read about Santa Muerte, especially this one, I was like, oh my God, it is so good. It's so intriguing, and it is great for if you are interested in learning about Santa Muerte, or if you're like me and you're heavily inspired by her to look at hell in a different light, because there are so many similarities between the two that it's a little crazy. This book goes into it a lot, and you know, there's descriptions of Santa Muerte being half living and half dead, and that she's half skeleton and half decomposing, and it's like that's how hell is described. Just so many things. So anyways, whenever I read about Santa Muerte, I'm honestly just more thinking of hell the entire time. But if you are interested in working with Santa Muerte, this is a great book. It's good for beginners, and I also feel like it's got a decent amount of information for like intermediates who are working with her. And that is it. That is my 4-star books of 2023. I hope you enjoyed these brief recaps. As per usual, you can find links to the full reviews in the description down below if you want to watch more of them. And of course, I will be talking with you tomorrow for my 5-star books. They are the best of the best books that I read this year for a variety of different reasons. So make sure to stay tuned for that. And of course, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I am trying to post every single day this year because I failed already for finishing off all of these videos before the end of the year. I'm recording this the same day you see this. Today is the 1st, and I am trying to make sure to upload every single day this year without missing a single day. So one of the goals of the year, we're going to keep with it. So tomorrow will be the 5-star books. I am super excited to talk about all of those tomorrow. Huge thank you for those of you who have come along for the journey of watching all of these book reviews from the past year. And of course, huge thank you to my patrons. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.